Angela. How's it going? Have you done any fabric today?
Hey, Ginger. I have, but I've been doing this kind of fabric, not the Microsoft fabric today.
As in, I see your sewing machine there. Does that mean that you've been using actual fabric, the stuff we always find if we don't put Microsoft fabric in our search engines?
That's exactly what I've been doing lately.
Great. Well, hey, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Angela Henry. I am a principal consultant at Fortified. I'm also a Microsoft Data Platform MVP, and I'm helping out with this Learn Live stuff. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. This is going to be a lot of fun. Really going to be enjoying doing this because we can take people's questions and not just do a recording. It's going to be a lot of fun. So.
Yes. Very exciting.
All right. Well, why don't I kick it off? My name is Ginger Grant, by the way. I am also pretty much like Angela. I am a principal consultant at Desert Isle Group and a Microsoft MVP and a Microsoft certified trainer. And like Angela, we've been playing around with Fabric since before it was officially released. So we got to learn all sorts of this cool stuff. So, and hey, we want you to follow along. Everything that we're doing, you can do at home on the Learn Live module. We got that QR code up there, but it's also AKA MS Learn Live 2024 0305F, which is not today, but okay, get the date.
I think that was the original schedule date.
Yeah.
And then schedules got changed.
Yeah, but it's at least something that people can actually remember, just like March 5th for whatever reason. And F for fabric, of course. So let's keep on moving with the slides. And I wanted to take a chance to do a call out to our wonderful moderators. So when you ask questions, and since this is a live session, I hope everybody takes advantage of that. Kamil Nowinski, who is also a Microsoft Data Platform MVP, and he's from the UK, as you can't tell from his name. And he's also a fabric expert who you will definitely want to connect with on LinkedIn. And while you're there, make sure you also connect with Avinash Sudani, who is a super user from Canada. So got people all over the globe today.
Awesome. I'm so glad we've got some moderators out there. So yeah, please, it's an interactive session. Chat with them, ask questions. Come join us.
Absolutely.
And to that end, like Ginger said, this is meant to be an interactive session, and we really want to help everyone learn together. And I think that helps with some of the cementing of the ideas. So if you want to follow along, again, you've got that URL there, right there in the slide, and you can just go follow along right as we go.
I think that's really helpful to do that too, because then you don't feel like you're going to be lost. And I have broken it on purpose, so I'll give people tips of what not to do. To not do the things that I've done when I was prepping for this.
Oh, Ginger, you probably skipped steps because you knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, well, I know how to break it too, so that's always fun. So hopefully I said hello in the chat, and hopefully you do too. I know I saw that Kamil put some text out there, and looking forward to hearing from you. I wonder where in the world people are joining from. You got any clues, Angela?
Oh, you know what? Given the time zone that we are trying to target, I'm hoping we have a lot of people in Australia and New Zealand and the continent of Asia, but all over the world, all over.
Yeah, though I doubt we'll get more people, unlike Kamil from the UK, because it's pretty darn late there.
It is late for them. It's almost late for me, but not quite late.
Yeah, well, you just never know what people's hours that they're running on anymore.
True. So if you want to head on over to the Fabric Career Hub, jumpstart your journey as a fabric analytics engineer. And it's a great place. It has lots of resources out there. Highly recommend you check it out. You can go ahead and get career insights from different folks out there. And there are folks like, from out in the community that can give you advice and help you with that. If you want to go to the next slide for me there, Ginger. Shabnam Watson, she is a great resource, and she's got some really good information out there for you that can kind of help you get through this, Fabric Career Hub and give some really good advice. And then on the next slide, you can also get role guidance to see where that analytics engineer fits in today's modern data landscape. And that's really important because a lot of people don't really understand where it fits. They're like, I'm learning this, but why? And where is that going to put me in the company? So you can check that out, and it gives you some really good role guidance for that data analytics, that Fabric analytics engineer.
I think it's really cool. They also put the average salary in there too. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, very helpful. Maybe motivating even.
Yeah. Well, I know that I personally know a couple of people who are looking for work, so it's good to always learn new skills because you never know if that is you. I know I've been surprised when companies got bought out. So, just being prepared just helps you plan your life and your career. And this career thing, I think, is really amazing. I'm actually really surprised that Microsoft did it because they put a lot of work into this, and there's a ton of information there and exam discounts.
Exactly. And if you continue with the Fabric Career Hub, you can see how it shows the different steps that you can take to get certified. So the first step is registering for that Cloud Skills Challenge. And when you do that, it'll also make you eligible for that 50% exam discount. So once you go through all of the steps and you're ready to take the exam, you can get that 50% exam discount through the Cloud Skills Challenge if you register for that.
That is really a great deal too, because regularly those exams are $165. So always good to save some money.
Yep. And if you have to take multiple exams, that adds up super duper fast.
What's funny too is today I'm doing some work for a company that is a Microsoft Gold partner, and they said, "Would you mind associating your certs with us because we need them for our certification?" So you never know when they might come in handy for where you want to do some work. So
exactly. And they've even put this exam cram session together so that you can study with a bunch of other people. And like I said, that whole interacting with other people when you're learning really helps cement that. And then you can even take a practice test and then finally just schedule out your exam.
I think that doing it with people is always really motivating too, because I know sometimes it's like, another exam. Yeah. So definitely that's a good thing to have, going to, getting with other people. All right. So in this Cloud Skills Challenge, we're looking at Fabric's analytics engineers. So in 13 hours, you're going to be learning how to do everything a data engineer would do with Fabric. So if you complete the challenge, then you can go ahead and you've got 30 days, I believe. Have you done this, Angela?
I didn't do it for this round, but I did it for the previous round. I did the 30 days, the 30-day challenge, and it was so much fun. And, again, it just kind of helps cement that knowledge, working with this.
Yeah, I actually did one of those things where it was really good the first couple of days, then I crammed most of it into the last 3 because I didn't want to not meet the challenge. But after you do that, you get that's what gives you that 50% off on the exam. So definitely want to go ahead and do that. It's also really good to challenge yourself. Even if you're not going to take the exam, hey, learning is a good way of doing it, and making yourself do it is also a way to make it stick. Make yourself do it, and learn all about Fabric because this stuff is new and it's not all easy either.
Yep, absolutely. So back to that exam cram. So it's coming up really soon. So make sure you get out there and register for it, so that you can take part in that and help you on your journey to get certified for Fabrics. I keep saying Fabrics. I want to say Fabrics, and it's not. It's like combining Fabric and analytics together.
Yeah,
it's Fabric.
And this is another live session too that people could take
Yep,
advantage of.
absolutely.
All right, so it's April 30th if you're in Australia. If you're not, it is the 29th here in the US. And we're going to be talking about organizing a lake house using medallion architecture. So
Sweet.
in the fabric way, yes. And there's only 2 sessions left for those of you who want to do the Learn Live sessions. The next one is going to be from with Greg Lowe from Australia and Tom Martins from Germany, and they're going to be talking about Spark and ETL ingesting. And then the last one on May 2nd is from 2 great speakers, Martin Catherall and Javier Villegas. They're both going to be talking about that last administer session, so don't want to miss those. So
Very
definitely
nice.
check this link out. Yeah.
All right, so let's get down to business here. Let's talk about what our learning objectives for this should be. We want to be able to describe the principles of using medallion architecture within data management. We want to be able to apply that medallion architecture framework within the Microsoft Fabric environment. We also want to be able to analyze any data that we've stored in our lakehouse using DirectLake in Power BI. And this is one thing that I'm super excited about is this whole DirectLake thing. It's like,
Oh, me too.
oh my gosh, I can hardly wait. I'm waiting for a client that I can actually use this on. I'm so excited. Um,
I, I hope to do that as well because it's so much of an improvement. For
it
those of
is.
you who've done direct query, the technology has made it what you wanted direct query to be, namely fast.
Yes, and it is. This is super fast. It's on par with import mode, which is hard to believe. It's just crazy how they've re-architected this and made it so much faster. And then
Yeah,
the last
Microsoft a lot.
thing, yeah, and the last thing is we want you to be able to describe the best practices to make sure that you've got good security and governance for your data using this medallion architecture method. So those are our learning objectives. And again, you can follow along at home with the learning module out there. And we're just going to walk through this and let's just get started. I'm ready. I'm
Great.
excited. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Well, with those objectives in mind, let's jump in and talk about what is medallion architecture anyway. Some of you may be familiar with it because Databricks first introduced it as a design pattern. Because it's a way of organizing your data into data lakes, which is what everybody is moving towards now, putting your data into a data lake. And the last thing you want in a data lake is data you can't find. You're going to need a well organized data lake. And people have adopted this medallion architecture so that everybody knows, hey, where does that raw data go? Where does the filtered data go? Where does the data go that we're going to actually use for our analytics? Well, raw data is going to go into bronze. Our filtered, kind of modified data will be in silver. And the stuff that we want people to do analytics on is going to be in gold. And the reason that we have this architecture is so that everyone can follow when they're landing and transforming your data. So whether or not you're ingesting it or not, best practices is copy that over into raw, don't edit it so that you can always edit it later. And then if you need to modify it in any way, interim wise, put it in silver. And then when you're ready to give it to people and say, this is what you want to load into your direct lake, that's when it goes into the gold layer.
Nice. So does that mean we're not going to have any more data swamps?
One can only hope.
I'm
If people
crossing my
follow the
fingers
rules.
on this one.
Yes. Yes. It's like the thing is that the rules aren't any good if nobody follows them. So there does need to be some structure. And of course, we need to make security follow that too, because, there's not that many people who really need to mess with the raw data. I mean, nobody needs to modify it. So we need to make sure that we adopt those kind of practices when you assign security to those different levels of architecture.
Nice. Nice. All right. So in this data-driven era, we need to be able to harness like all of this data from these disparate data sources, and because it's super critical for business success. So what this session is doing, or this module is doing, is introducing this medallion architecture, and it's going to help you bring that structure and efficiency to your lake house, so we don't have data swamps anymore. No more lake swamps. We don't want swamps. I don't like alligators, so they have big chompy teeth. I don't like that. So this module is going to guide you through how to figure out what goes in bronze, what goes in silver, what goes in gold, and really help you kind of organize, refine, and curate that in a really effective manner. And it doesn't matter whether you are a newcomer to data and analytics or whether you are a seasoned professional. This module has stuff for both ends of the spectrum in there. The only thing is that there is kind of a little prerequisite in that you really need to understand some basic SQL and have some basic understanding of how Power BI works. But other than that, this is great content, and we really hope it's going to help you succeed in your Fabric analytics. I didn't mess that up journey.
All right, so the medallion architecture is a method that you have to organize your data in the data lake. And in Fabric, that generally means you're going to create containers inside of one lake, because that's a place in Fabric where you store all of your data. And the containers can be stored in different workspaces, or they can be showed, like how we're doing an example, inside of one workspace. And the different, just depending on how much data, the way you work in your organization, how big your organization is, there's more than one way to do it, but you need that separation in however you do choose to implement it. And the different layers can be viewable inside of one lake house, or you can use folders inside of an Azure Data Lake store and shortcut them into your lake house and use that
Oh,
instead. Yeah. Do you do that?
shortcuts.
Yes, shortcuts are awesome. I know that I've got a client that had been using Synapse. And so we've got all of our data inside of Data Lake Gen 2, and we're not copying it over. We're just creating a shortcut in Fabric and using that shortcut inside of one lake for how we're going to manage the data inside of Fabric. So a lot
How
of options
cool
for
is
that.
that?
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, so if we go a little bit deeper, we can see how it you've got your raw bronze layer, then you've got your silver, it's kind of your validated, and your gold, which is kind of your enriched, or really what I like to call that is that's the presentation layer. That's the layer that you are going to surface to your users, whether they are your business folks, whether they are your data scientists. Doesn't matter. That's the layer that you really want to surface to your consumers, is that gold layer. And what's really cool about this is that these data lakes are built on top of the Delta Lake format. And that is one of the things that makes this architecture so fast, is because that format is very efficient at storing data, which means it's super efficient at bringing that data back up and surfacing it to you. So it's super, super exciting. And not only that, and and people think, well, you're storing it in files. How, are we kind of going backwards in time? Didn't we go to databases because we wanted to ensure transactional consistency? Well, you know what? They have added that native support in the Delta Lake format. So you've got that, and I always say this word wrong, the atomicity, because I can't pronounce it. um the
You got it.
atomicity, the consistency, the isolation, and the durability of your transactions. So you don't have to worry about it not being in a database, because databases, that's what we used to have to use databases for, and we still do, but now we can have this in our one lake. So that's super cool.
I think it's just really amazing how the technology has progressed so that we can have a database on a file
Yeah,
versus before we had to move our files into databases. And now with a lake house, hey, a file's good enough.
yeah, absolutely.
It's awesome. So with this medallion architecture, all of as Angela said, all of your files are going to be in one lake. And that's where your lake houses are going to be as well. So you can, having that established pattern means that everybody knows where the data is. So don't have to worry about people having to guess or not following your patterns, because that's the way to ensure compliance, is to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. So any kind of data that you've got lying around, including if we're talking about mirroring, if you are mirroring your data, you're going to mirror that into bronze, because that is unaltered raw data, and then that can go straight to your presentation, DirectLake semantic model kind of stuff. So kind of a neat thing to do there. Any kind of data can go into bronze. Maybe you've got IoT data or something like
Oh,
that. Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, it's kind of neat because we can handle, and if you do want to stream your data, you can, Fabric can handle that as well. And
Okay.
if you need, let's face it, everybody needs to transform data. I'm sure back in the day you might have done some SSIS, or maybe a lot of
Maybe
M.
maybe just a little. Just a
Yeah.
little.
Yeah, well, one thing that I see a lot more people doing, and I'm doing it myself, is instead of doing all that data transformation inside of Data Factory, which I definitely can do. There's no reason, nothing stopping me from that. But we can also do it inside of a notebook using Spark, which is what we're going to be doing today in the demo. And what I find really cool about that is if you know SQL, you can just keep on writing it in Spark, which I like.
Oh, that's so good because I can't tell you how many times I've tried to learn Python. And I'm going to be honest, I know just enough Python to be like super dangerous. So I'm lucky in that I've got a Python expert that I can, at work, that I can say, here, I wrote this. Now make it pretty.
Nice,
So, um,
nice.
but then they don't know SQL very well. So it's kind of a yin and yang. It works really well
Yeah.
together.
The only thing to remember when you're doing Spark SQL is, unlike everything you see in the lakehouse, you have to know ANSI SQL rather than Transact SQL.
That has
And
bitten me a couple of
uh,
times.
yeah, me too. I'm like, yes, let's hear it for Copilot, so it can tell me how to do T SQL and ANSI SQL, so I know how to do it. Yeah, if you ever do
Exactly.
concat statements, are not the same. So
No.
yeah,
I'm glad
but
I'm not
all
the
of the
only one.
No, no, it's like, ah, geez. And then going back and forth, because I try to do a whole bunch of stuff in the lake house, because then I can just use T-SQL, which is, of course, much better. And then, and what's really cool is now with Fabric, when we create our Power BI semantic models, you can query those inside of the SQL endpoint as if it was a database as well. So
Huh,
for all the people like, I want to do all of my stuff in SQL because I've always done it. Hey, you can do that with your semantic layer as well. So
nice.
great
Very
feature.
nice. All right. Well, we are talking about the medallion architecture. So we need to give you a little bit more detail about what each one of these medallions are. So when we look at the bronze layer, it's sometimes called the raw layer, but it's what it really is. It's the first layer. And this is where your ingested data typically lands. So we land it here. We don't do any modifying. It should look exactly like it did in the data source. And whether you're doing full or incremental, how the one lake technology works is that it's essentially appending incrementally and it grows over time. So you don't have to worry about schema drift and all that. It handles that for you, which is, oh my gosh, back in the days of
So nice.
integration services, you change a column name or a data type, you had to go and redo your entire package. It was so painful. So yeah, this is super awesome. And yeah, I'm dating myself on that, but that's okay. I've got battle scars. I need to work them out. And what's also really cool is that it can be any combination of streaming or batch transactions. So, like you said, if you've got IoT devices that are streaming data in, you can land that in there. Or if you've just got batch stuff that you're pulling in, you can stick that in there as well. Either one works perfectly fine.
Yeah,
And oh,
I'm with you. I so appreciate the fact that you don't have to care about the schemas anymore. Wow, so
yeah,
painful.
yeah.
All the stuff.
And one more thing about this bronze layer is that, and this is what this okay, so I'm going to be a little nitpicky here, and one of the reasons that I really don't like the bronze, silver, gold is that, to me, that implies that bronze doesn't have as much value as a gold does. And in the medallion architecture, that is so not true. Your bronze layer is like the treasure trove of your raw data, and that serves as the foundation for everything else that's to come. So you have to really make sure that you've got that bronze layer nice and solid in there. So there, okay, I'm putting my soapbox away. I'm done.
Yeah. I'm with you. I like the medallion architecture, but sometimes I will admit to changing the names out and calling the bronze layer the raw layer, because I think those descriptive words really help people better understand what should go in there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And once we're done with bronze, we're into silver, and that's the validated layer. So anytime, so raw data, don't touch it. That's what you have in bronze. Silver, well, you've tweaked it some way, somehow. I know that I created a silver layer using medallion architecture. I was grabbing in a whole bunch of stuff from Salesforce, and they had the most ridiculous columns on the planet. So I renamed everything and cut out all the columns that I wasn't using and put those in silver before, and I called it stage, and before I put it into my curated or gold layer. And so I'm going to be doing some validation for silver. If it's lousy formatted, this is where I'm going to fix it. I'm not going to fix anything in raw. Raw stays however it came. But the silver layer, that's when things are fixed. You do some transformation. You might make sure everything's typed appropriately. If you're doing validation checks, you might decide that you don't need a bunch of the columns that you put into raw because nobody cares for reporting. So it may not contain everything that raw does, and that's fine. Doesn't need to. So it's just
Yeah.
the stuff they're going to use.
Yeah. So where I do a lot of work in the silver layer is master data management, because I do a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
systems integration. And
sure.
when you have stuff coming from multiple different systems, everybody calls the same thing a different word. And
Oh
so
yeah.
that's where that master data comes in. And so that's where I do a lot of my master data management, is in that silver layer, and kind of standardizing and conforming to what the business understands.
Now, do you find that you always need a silver layer, or do sometimes you do go from raw to curated, Angela?
You know, very rarely do I skip the silver layer. If it's just a super simple project with only one data source, then I probably don't need a whole lot in the silver layer. Not that often, but
Yeah.
every great once in a while, I can actually skip the silver layer. And you know what? That's the cool thing. It's not hard and fast. It's
No.
guidelines to help you figure out how to organize your data and refine it.
I tell you one reason that I'm with you. I don't always use it. I most of the time use it. And tell you what, one of the reasons that I use it is because if I've got a process that I'm going through, that I'm building some kind of a data pipeline or process, I want to make sure that I write things to my different layers so that if it breaks in the middle, I don't have to start from the very beginning.
That
So
is
another,
smart. Good thing.
yeah. Well, you get busted because you have to like redo a whole bunch of stuff. You start thinking, well, how could I make this more robust? And
Yes.
writing to these different layers gives you a pipeline that you can restart. And we always want to think about not just what's going to work perfect all the time, but what are you going to do that time you get bad data, or that time something happens and you are halfway in the middle. Where are you going to start from? How are
Yeah.
you
Well,
going
I
to
don't know about you, Ginger, but none of my clients have dirty data. So
Oh, yeah, right. Anyway, clean data is more like, but yeah, I mean, and your process just can blow up. You just never
yeah.
know, or you might get delayed. Like I had a client that we were supposed to get files from a third party, and they were supposed to be there at midnight, and sometimes they weren't.
Yeah.
So but we wanted to get to a point where we could just do it from that point forward, just to make sure that would be the holding queue. And it's another thing you can do with silver is make sure you've got stuff written in an interim fashion.
Very nice. Restartability. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And then, so now we're at the gold layer. That's the top. And this is where, all of our transformations, and this is where we're actually going to start doing our data model. So if we are going to build a dimensional model, this is where we do it, in the gold layer. We've already, standardized our data. We have already, cleaned it. We've done all of that. Now we need to shape it and we need to refine it. We need to aggregate it. Um, and and then we can present it to the business users for consumption. And again, those business users, they could be actual business users like accounting or finance or HR or sales, or they could be your data science team. So it really just depends on your use case. And here's the really cool thing about gold layers: you don't have to have just one. Most
Yes.
people think you can only have one. No, you can have multiples depending on your audience. And that's like the magic of the medallion architecture. You don't have to have just one.
Yeah, you definitely, because that could also be a real big security thing. Like I'm working with a client now and we're dealing with payroll data, and you know how sensitive that
Oh yeah,
information is. Yeah, so we've got a model that doesn't have any payroll data in it because it just makes things safer.
exactly. Exactly.
I also had a client that they said that they wanted 10 years of data in all of their reporting, and this was a lie. So, we've created different models that had, 2+ years, 2 years
Yep.
plus this year. And that way, everybody who's doing Power BI reports can get their analytics done a lot more quickly than if you have to parse through 10 years of data, too.
Yeah.
So,
That
other
makes
things
a
to think
big
about.
difference. Yep.
Absolutely. So, all right. So, when I looked up medallion architecture in the internet, this is what I found. There actually is medallion architecture. And what I wanted to talk about is depending on your organization, you might even need more layers. And this is why, if it's possible, like when I've used the raw staging and curated, I also had a reference area where I put files that we were using in our processing, like lists of source files that I had to grab, um, the holiday schedule for the Federal Reserve, put that in the reference area. So you may need more layers. You don't have to have just three. So
Yeah.
that might be have you ever used more than 3?
I absolutely have, on more than one occasion, especially when I was working on really big systems integrations projects. Because we may have like be pulling from 5 different sales forces, but everybody has done something different in that sales
Oh,
force.
yes.
So, we have to pull it all in as Salesforce, and then we kind of munge it all together as a single Salesforce, as an example. And that's added that additional layer in there. And that's been very, very helpful. And that goes back to that whole restartability thing too, because you don't
Yes.
want to have to reload that Salesforce data every single time. So yeah.
Absolutely not. Yeah, so, I mean, we're calling this, medallion. People say that it's 3 layers, but I think there's flexibility into, like, naming it things that really kind of reflect what's going on in your organization, and having more than 3 if, like what you're talking about, if the situation warrants it. Certainly don't have to do 3 only.
Mm-mm. No, no, and I had a client once where we didn't use the, medallion terms, because the business just they couldn't quite grasp it. So we used level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. That made sense to the business, so that's what we used, and they knew that level 4 was the top, and level 1 is where they started, and it made sense, so that's what we went with, and it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you're well organized, it doesn't really matter the names per se.
Exactly, exactly. Um, so moving that data across those layers in Fabric, that's what's going to help you refine and organize, and so it can be consumed for downstream activities. Um, but depending on your organization, there are some key questions that you're going to have to ask before you can really start this. Um, how much data are you working with? That's gonna determine a lot of things that you're gonna have to answer to, and how you're gonna design your architecture. How complex are those transformations that you have to make? If you have to just make really super simple stuff, you can probably do that in SQL. But if you have to do some really complex stuff like MapReduce or whatever, you probably are going to want to use that Spark engine and make that Spark engine do that work for you, because trying to do some of those transformations using SQL is just not efficient. So you really need to be aware of those complex transformations that you're going to have to make. And then how often are you actually going to have to move data between your layers? This can be a real big one, because you know what? When you are moving data, depending on your source and or your destination, you could be paying egress charges. So you need to be very aware of how often you have to move data. And then also, what tools are you most comfortable with? You know, Ginger, you and I, we have been around in the data community for a while, and we could probably write T-SQL blindfolded, you know, with our
Yep.
hands tied behind our back, you know, all those things, because we've been doing it for so long. And
Yep.
those are the tools that we are super comfortable with. Whereas, like I said earlier, I'm not so good at Python. I could find to fumble my way through, but you know, so you really need to understand what tools you're most comfortable with and your team is most comfortable with. That's how you're going to become really efficient at building your medallion architecture and moving your data across those layers in Fabric.
You know, I always try to make sure that I'm writing it for my clients too, so that they understand it. And tell you what, I don't write much Python that's not SQL based, because they can't read it. And so
That's exactly.
you want to write stuff that people can support. It's not about what a, you know, I'm not here to impress anybody with my skills. I'm here to write code that can be reused
That's
on and on.
exactly right. Yeah, being in the consulting business, it has to be maintainable by the people that are left behind, i.e., the people who have hired you to come in and build this thing for them. Because if they can't support it, that's not sustainable for them. Absolutely.
Hey, we got a question in chat that I wanted to bring up, because it's always a consideration when we're talking about the medallion architecture. Just gonna
Okay.
throw that out there. Where How do you fit medallion architecture into dev, test, and prod? Question from the interwebs.
Yeah. So that's a great question, because I in talking with some people, they actually confuse the different layers of the medallion architecture with dev, test, and prod. And that's not what the medallion architecture is, not at
Nope.
all.
Nope.
No, the dev, test, prod, that is your change management. That's how you move things through the application development lifecycle. Whereas the medallion architecture is the structure of what you are building. So how do those dev, test, and prod environments come into this? Well, essentially, you're going to have dev, test, and prod environments, and with that same medallion architecture across all of those environments. So if you've got a dev data lake, then you're going to need a test data lake, and then you're going to need a prod data lake. You know, and you're going to have bronze in each one of those. You're going to have silver in each one of those, because again, this is that application development lifecycle. You have to be able to develop it and test it. And we don't want to test in production. We don't
No,
want to.
absolutely. You know, one thing that I tend to do is, because I tend to you know, I've used the medallion architecture inside of Fabric is newer, and I've been doing a lot more with it in Synapse, and doing a lot with folders inside of Azure Data Lake Gen 2.
Oh, yeah.
So having a dev, a test, and a prod folder inside of Azure Data Lake Gen 2. So that's where you can, you know, work on your different areas, because you don't want to, you know, make a new people are like, oh, why don't you just put all the raw stuff together? What's the big deal? Well, what if you accidentally overwrite a file when you are testing? No, that's why you need those extra folders.
Absolutely.
And you know, I know it ends up being a lot of data, but then again, and but data in a data lake is only $28 a month per terabyte, I believe. I think that's right. You think I've got that number right?
That sounds right. Essentially,
Yeah,
storage is cheap.
right.
It's
So there's no
much
reason
cheaper
not
than
to
it
do
used
that.
to be.
Right. So you've got your code that is in dev, and you're going to have your section of your data lake that's going to be in dev. So that's where you're going to write it. So if you accidentally overwrite a file, hey, you didn't kill production,
Yep.
which is a fine thing, which is why we don't want to test in production.
No.
So really good question. I'm really glad whoever put that in chat asked it.
Yes.
All right. So we've talked about medallion architecture for quite a bit, and we've talked about different ways we can move the data between the different layers. now let's kind of move into how we're going to do that. There's a number of different options. None of them are necessarily wrong. Like what you said, Angela, it all has to do with the skills that people have
Mhm.
in the organization that you're working with to determine, oh, I will use everything inside of a pipeline, and I'm going to use data flow gen 2. You could do that if you don't have a ton of data anyway. You can. All depends.
Yes, it all depends. Yeah, it goes back to those questions that you have to ask. So,
Exactly.
you have to look at what happens in each one of those layers and what tool can be used and then figure out what your team's comfortable with. So, in the bronze layer, you're typically just ingesting data. You can do that with pipelines, data flows, notebooks. Depends on your volume of data and what you're comfortable with. You choose. Silver, that's where you're going to be cleaning and validating your data. Notebooks work really good for that. You can use data flows as well. My personal experiences, I like notebooks better. To me, they're just user friendly is the wrong word, the wrong term I'm looking for, but it just makes more sense to me to do it in a notebook than it does in a data flow.
One thing I like about notebooks is you've got traceability because it's really easy for somebody to do a compare in source control to see what the differences are in the versions between one notebook and another notebook, and to find out what the differences are between this version of the data flow and the last version of the data flow. Not so easy. And it's not easy
No.
to put in comments inside of your data flows either.
No, no. That's one of the things that I really like about notebooks is it's markup. You can use markup to
Yes.
put in comments and explain what you're doing, and I absolutely love that. That to me is super super fantastic. And then your gold layer, which is where your transformations and your modeling happens, you're basically going to use a SQL endpoint or a data set, depending on, dealer's choice. You choose which one are you more comfortable with. You pick. It also depends on what your team is more comfortable with and supportability beyond that.
Yeah, and that gets into the data lake or data warehouse, and that's a whole other conversation for a whole nother day. And I'm doing a
Yep,
session on that, but that's another thing to think about for your gold layer.
absolutely.
So when we're doing bronze ingesting, to be honest, what I really like doing is if I'm getting it from a third party, if I'm getting my data from say um, Salesforce, because that's so much fun. I use the pipeline copy command. Microsoft has put a lot of effort and energy into having over 100 different connectors inside of pipelines, so you can connect to all sorts of different third parties, and you can grab that data and write it really, really quickly. And it's pretty painless. And that way I can don't have to worry about, writing a whole lot of code for it. And I know it's going to work in a very performant way. So I tend to do that more than anything else if I'm doing ingestion. But again, it depends on where the data is coming from.
Well,
What do you
that kind
think?
of yeah, and that kind of goes back to that whole data orchestration versus data transformation and which
Yes.
tool is, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. For data
Yes.
orchestration where you just need to move data, no transformation, pipelines are the best
I
because
think
like
so.
you said, over 100 connectors out of the box, you plug it up, you hit go and it just works.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think that is like the best. I mean, because what's great is Fabrics put all the tools together in one place, so you can create a longer pipeline. And the first part is your copy data over into bronze, and then you can do all of your notebooks in your silver layer in that same pipeline. So they just keep on happening one right after the other, and that's really easy for notification if anything crashes too. So
Yeah.
I like using pipelines throughout it, but they're really just calling notebooks other than this layer, which is when I tend to just basically, just dump it. Um,
Yep.
and yeah, you could use data flows, but generally speaking, I don't know why you'd need to, because you're not transforming
Yeah, you're
anything.
not transforming it. You're orchestrating the movement.
Yeah. So I can't think of a good scenario to use data flows, to be quite honest. But maybe there is one. I'm sure there is. I can't think of it off the top of my head. Haven't used it. I have done notebooks because It depends on where you're grabbing data.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a little bit easier to more control with
Mhm.
over with a notebook. And also depends if you've got like a giganto amount of data, you might want to use a notebook as well.
Yeah,
So,
take advantage of that Spark engine.
absolutely.
All right. So transforming our data and loading it into Silver. So this is where we want to do that transformation, and we're going to focus on the quality and consistency. So remember how I said earlier, master data management, that's where this comes in. And we're not doing any data modeling here. We are strictly focusing on cleaning it up and making it consistent. And to do that, best tools for this are either data flows or notebooks. My personal preference is notebooks because you have much more control, and you can put, because you're doing transformations, it's business logic. With notebooks, you can put those comments in that markup, and it explains the business logic. It's a little bit harder to do in a data flow. So that's one of the reasons why I really like notebooks for transforming data, and loading it into the Silver layer.
I totally agree with you, and I really appreciate when people. I mean, I know there's always like a thing about commenting, but if you have Copilot, you can get it to comment your code for you. But I don't think there's any shortcut around writing down the why.
Nope.
And you better understand code when you know why on earth did somebody do this. Put a notebook, tell people why you did that.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. Well, once you get into the gold layer, you're going to make sure that you are putting it into a format that people are going to be using it in. So someone is good, when you're looking at things in gold, you're thinking somebody may be using this to back into Power BI report, which is all, hey, let's face it, Fabric is built on top of Power BI. And that's exactly why a lot of people want to transform their data. Because if they can't see it in a Power BI report, then it just didn't happen. So determine what the data models you need for Power BI. You certainly do not need a 1-to-1 ratio from semantic model to report, and you should create models that could be somebody's semantic layer without having to tweak it from a data structure perspective. So make sure that you've got relationships. um, my pet peeve, because like there were so many systems that were written like this, and developers still do this today. All the primary keys are ID. Tell me how many times you've seen that one, Angela. Every single table, it's ID. No,
What
give them nice names.
what ID?
I know. I think I've been heard it was easier to code. I'm like, yeah, well, that's great.
Yeah.
Because you want the relationships to be obvious to people too. So if I
Yeah.
call something product ID, it's product ID everywhere, not product key some places. Now, be consistent. Um,
Yes.
def- and, and someone's going to use this gold layer and then add their DAX and um, put it so that they can make it into a semantic layer for Power BI. So
Yeah.
it's definitely you want to be in conversation with the people that are generating reports so that you make sure that you have modeled the data that they need for the different reports that are required. And this is where you might also look to implement security, because if you are looking at implementing a lakehouse, or data warehouse, you can implement data masking. So
Yes.
think about your security layers so that perhaps if you do have, some information that you want to be confidential for most users, you can mask it inside of your gold layer, inside of a lake house. So,
Yeah, absolutely. We just had a question pop up, and I think it's probably because of the delay is why we're just now seeing it.
oh,
But it says, is it possible to add comments in the M code generated as a data flow?
so data flow gen 2, then that would be because
That
that's
that
where M
I'm
is.
going to assume that, yes.
Inside of well, you can if you look inside of the code itself,
Mhm.
but I don't know how many people do that. Is
I
there another
do.
way that you know? Yeah, I know, I do too. Click on that advanced tab, look at all the code.
That's
If you
exactly
just
what I do.
but if you're not doing that, I mean, is there any kind of I don't know of a way of making it so it's visible outside, do you?
I don't know how to surface it outside of that other than when you look at the semantic model in Power BI. if you hover over the little eye icon on the steps, it'll actually show you the comments. But I don't know in data flows how you would surface that.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I'm gonna have to go play with this and see if I can make it show up.
Yeah, I mean, because you can, but it's the thing is you can't see it because it's inside of the code layer,
Yeah,
the advanced layer
yeah.
inside. So
That's a great question. I'm gonna play with that now.
yeah. Well, the other thing too is that like I've never seen put it this way. You ever seen anybody put any comments? Okay, you may have done it because you're awesome. But have you ever seen anybody put comments inside of their M code?
No. On
Oh,
yeah. General
take that
general
back. I
blanket
did
statement is
once.
no.
Yeah. I worked used to work with Trev Gott, you may know him, and he
Yeah.
wrote the most insane M I have ever seen in my life because we were connecting to a third party data source that we could not touch. So, and he did do comments because it was the most wild M code I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally speaking, and I looked at it because I'm like, what the is this? It was
Yeah.
hundreds of lines long. But
Yeah.
no, as a general rule, no. That's a one time.
Yeah.
So not happening.
Mm-mm.
So more thoughts on the gold layer, Angela. What are you thinking about what kinds of ones you'd create?
Yeah. So I said this earlier, you don't have to have just one gold layer. You can have multiple, and they can be based on audience. It can even be based on domain. So depending on your use case, who is your consumer? That is always the question you need to start with. Who is going to consume this data? That is going to dictate how your gold layer is modeled and the format that it's in and all of those things. And and sometimes, like you said earlier, you may use a data warehouse instead of a lake house. It depends on your use case. So, the whole medallion architecture is a guideline um, to help you organize and refine your data. It's not, hard and fast rules. So,
Have you
those are
gotten
my,
into using domains yet
you know
inside
what?
of your workspaces?
I haven't played with those yet. I've got some smaller clients where domains don't really make a whole lot of sense yet. But I do have some clients from the past where I'm like, oh my gosh, that would have been so helpful if we'd had domains because the organizations are so large. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm really hoping that I can get back onto one of those really large clients where I think this would be a really good fit.
I've been filling them out, but I'm not using a client where I find them helpful, but it's an option, so
Yeah,
I'm using it.
nice.
Yeah. So we can, of course, transform our gold using delta tables. We definitely want to use delta tables because that turns our files into a database, and so we can connect to those delta files with using SQL endpoints with Power BI. They really are designed to perform a lot better because they use actually the same kind of internal logic that Power BI does in the Vertipack engine. It's a columnar based. And so it does compression based on columns of data, which is one of the reasons that makes it more database like because it's used like column store indexes. And it can help enable downstream consumption. If you're putting something into a lakehouse, Fabric is looking for it to be in Parquet, and you need Parquet to be able to implement Delta. So something that you're going to put in your gold layer as well as making sure everything is in Delta format.
All right. So when it comes down to querying and reporting on your data in the lakehouse, we now know what medallion architecture is, and we know how to implement it kind of in a logical manner. But now we want to look and see how we implement it technically. How do we implement this in a technical manner? So, um, can you help me with that, Ginger? How are we going to do this? We know
So
logic
what we're going to
do it.
Yeah. what we're going to do is we're going to basically we got to figure out where our raw data is. We're going to stick it the bronze layer. So how are we going to do that? Well, pipelines, we might copy it into bronze, and then we might, start writing notebooks for silver, and then, notebooks for gold too, if we wanted, transformation into gold as well.
Mhm.
So,
Okay. All right. That's one way to
okay.
do it.
Got some other thoughts on how to do it?
Yeah. If you go to the next slide, I'll tell you what I'm thinking.
Okay.
The SQL endpoint.
Absolutely.
For us old timers, this is our go-to. We can produce stuff super fast. If you've been writing SQL as long as Ginger and I have, you can do things super quickly. So using that SQL endpoint is probably one of the fastest ways and the most maintainable, because that SQL is one of the languages that even business folks can understand and pick up on very quickly. So using the SQL endpoint is another option for querying data in your lakehouse, and it looks just like SQL. You just write SQL, and it, even though you're looking at files, it treats it like a database.
I do this for Spark. I write all my code in Transact, and then I'm like, oh, cool, that's what I want. And then if I have to make changes for ANSI, then I know how to fix it.
Yep,
But yeah,
exactly.
and I also you take advantage of this little drop down down here and open it up in SQL Server Management Studio too.
Yep, very nice. I'm
Yeah.
so glad they added that functionality in there.
Yes. Yes. No reason to throw out all the skills that we already know. So one thing to remember though is that you are not doing any kind of transformation, so no CRUD in your lakehouse. Lakehouse is just for reading.
Yes,
So
that's a really good point. There have been a couple of times when I've actually caught myself, and I'm like, oh darn it, it's read only. I can't make that change
yes.
here. I've got to go to the notebook. I've got to, yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
I mean, I know that someone says, well, I can't edit it. I'm like, no, that's what you have. That's what you're doing. That's not what it's for. It's not for, which is just kind of a bizarre concept, but
Yeah.
you can't, it's the way that technology works. You need to use other tools for that, which is why we have them. So.
Yep. All right. So we've talked about tailoring, making your medallion layers different for different needs. Think of your audiences. And make sure that you've got use cases out there for your audiences so that you know what they need and how they need to consume it. That's really kind of the big takeaway here is understanding how your audience is going to consume this, and that you're going to have multiple audiences. There's not just one audience when you talk about building your medallion architecture.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some different considerations for lake house management. So, because you do have to plan this if you're going, because again, this isn't something that we are going to be able to, modify in the lake house. So, how are we going to do it?
All right. How are we going to do this? Well, there are some really big things that we need to consider when we want to start building out our lake house. Security. I think that's the biggest one right there. And then the next thing is, how are we going to handle continuous integration and continuous delivery, or CI/CD? Those are the kind of the two really big questions that even when before Fabric was a thing, where we would interact with the product group and say, okay, how are you going to secure this? Okay, how am I going to deploy this? These are the big things. So these are the big things that our clients need to do as well.
Yep, and we need to make sure that we handle security appropriately. I've got a question in chat that kind of ties into this. How would permission flow from workspace to domain? Well, your workspace is going to be assigned to a domain most likely. They don't necessarily, flow to one another. The things that do flow are the way that your different layers are going to have permissions. So your bronze layer, read only, nobody gets to edit it. And very few people even need to tweak it. A lot
Mhm.
of that can be system users. And then utilization in your silverware. The people who need to do that, mess with that, are the people who are writing the pipelines. If you're not writing a pipeline, you don't need to do it. Anything, but that you do want to have, the ability to modify, unlike what you have in raw. You want to be able to modify, to tweak. And then gold goes back to, no, you can't edit it anymore. But a lot more people are going to have access to gold, and that's where we're going to start looking at doing row level security, and maybe add a delta lake index to our information that we have, which we probably won't bother with any of the other layers.
Nice. All right. So when we talk about CI, oh, do you have a question?
No, I think
Okay.
you got this one
Okay.
nailed.
Okay. All right. So when we talk about CI/CD, this has always been like a huge pain point because we want to be able to automate deployments. I don't want to spend my nights and weekends deploying code. Those days are gone. I am not doing that anymore. And thankfully, we've got Git integration. Microsoft was thinking ahead on this and they've planned this out. So there's Git integration. And if you follow that QR code, or if you click the no, you don't click it, you scan it. Yeah, you scan the QR code, or if you follow that link, the AKA MSAAO75YO, they're putting it in the chat for you. That's going to take you to the intro to Git integration. And what that really gets you is version control. You get automated deployments. You can get monitoring with that. You can implement security measures, and it makes sure that you're producing or releasing high quality code, that your stuff has been validated and it's reliable. Those are so crucial when it comes to deploying code. Nobody enjoys a product that has bugs in it. And thankfully, Microsoft was thinking ahead and they've built that Git integration into Fabric for us. So, it's no longer after the fact, it's built right in from the get-go.
Yeah, and we also have DevOps, so you can put tickets into it, and comments and release notes and all the stuff you would have in traditional development projects.
Yes, it is so nice.
All right, well, this brings us to the exercise. So we're going to be taking a look at doing what we're just talking about inside of Fabric.
Awesome.
So, yeah. So I'm going to go here inside of my Fabric workspace, and I'm going to create a new workspace just for this particular exercise. And I wanted to do that by clicking on this giant green button that says new workspace. And I'm going to name this, and I'm going to call this medallion architecture.
And for those of you who are following along at home, this is the exercise is in unit 6. So, and Ginger's not going to be going through every single step that's in that exercise because of time. We just don't have the time to be able to do that. But she's going to be going through the major steps, and she's going to be explaining why we are doing some of these things.
So I do like uploading images, and so I put my favorite.
Oh, it's Clippy.
Clippy, yes. I like putting in icons in workspaces because then people better understand them. Oh, one thing that I did not show you that you need to make sure that you have whenever you are creating a workspace is to need to make sure that your workspace is premium. And notice I've got this little diamond up here. I have a trial. You see I've got 48 days left, so I've got time. You need to assign what you're doing to a Fabric capacity, a premium capacity, which is going away, or the trial to be able to perform this code because we're using different Fabric components that require it.
Yep.
So for that, I'm going to actually, now I don't have to because everything I can, get through here, but I'm going to change to data engineering because we're doing data engineering and I think it's kind of cool. So,
whoa, wait a second. You didn't even have to go to a different window?
Didn't have to, not if I didn't want to.
Oh, it's just right there. It's on the selector on the screen. No more having to have a data factory tab. No more having to have a Synapse tab.
No,
We can
but I
just
have to
do
have
one right.
everything on the planet. I don't have everything on the planet up, and that's just great because I don't want to have like more things that that I have up already because of course I've got way too many as it is. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to create a new lake house inside of my medallion architecture. So I'm going to go to my little clippy thing too. So I'm going to go with new lake house, and I'm going to call my new lake house sales. And I'm going to go ahead and say create. And I'm going to be kind of cheating because I'm going to just upload some files. But inside, I want to make sure that I'm using my medallion architecture. So I'm going to add this bronze folder here.
Nice.
I'm going to go ahead and create this. So I've got my stuff all organized here. And I'm going to, inside of my bronze folder, and I've got an analytics endpoint already for this. I'm going to upload some files.
All right.
And these are the files that I'm going to upload. So I have them here in my orders folder. I'm going to just grab all of these and upload them. Go ahead and say upload to upload these folders. And now we can see that I've got these three files here. So naturally you're thinking, well, then I should just be able to make tables out of them, right?
Yeah.
And I'll call this sales. Guess what? Doesn't going to work. No. Well, let's talk about what we're doing here. So we've got data that we want to put inside of Power BI. And this is just one file with 3 different years. So this is what I like to call a Lord of the Rings file. It's one file to rule them all. This isn't going to work for Power BI. We need to make a dimensional model, and we don't have dimensional modeling data here. So we're going to need to make that happen inside of our bronze layer. So we've got our data, so we're going to need to transform our data to make it go into a format that we can actually use. So for that, I'm going to create a new notebook. So I'm going to open up a new notebook here. And here I could just call this silver. And inside of my notebook, what the first thing that I'm going to want to do, and if you are following along, you will see that you're going to be doing this inside of the code. It works the exact same way. So what I want to do is I want to do some data transformation of my data. So I'm going to change this to Markdown, and I'm going to edit this and say what I'm actually going to be doing. So I'm going to create my table definition so that I can define what it is that I'm going to be doing here.
Okay.
So I'm going to go to my code section here. And notice I don't need to put in PySpark all the time. And it's going to load up all of my files in bronze and load that up. So one thing that I want to check, though, is that this is case sensitive. And so it's going to blow up because I capitalized bronze. I did that before. So make sure that this is in SQL. You have to worry about your case sensitivity. And if I had left that capitalized, this would blow up.
I
So
can't
if you
tell you
have,
how many times case sensitivity has bit me. And I'm like,
oh, yeah.
but, and then it's like, oh, wrong case.
Yeah. All right. By the way, if I wasn't in a Fabric specified workspace, this would blow up. I've also done that too because I've accidentally put code and forgot to mark it that way. So now that we've got our data, look, now we've got a table that we can take a look at. But we've got all of our data loaded here so we can see it's got a lot of different stuff in it. So we've got sales, we've got orders, we've got customers, we've got products. So we're going to need to probably bust that out into a lot of different elements so that we've got more things that we can load up. So we're going to add some columns here in our next bit of code. So let's roll over. So we're going to put a file name and basically changed flagged from 0 to 1 to true and false. And we're going to create a created and modified timestamp here. So it's not doing anything because we don't have any displays. So we saw absolutely nothing when we went to do that. So I'm going to create some more code so we can actually see what we are doing. I can see that I've ran it, but this didn't give us anything interesting to take a look at. So let's take a look at defining the schema for this table. And now that we've got our schema defined, we're going to create a table. So the thing that I tried to do that didn't work, yeah, gonna make that happen right here. All right, so if I refresh this, I now see that we have our silver sales table created here.
Magic.
Yeah, just a little bit of code, just some, and we transformed it. And now what we want to make sure is that if we get any more data, it's going to work as well, not just the data that we have, just had there already. So we're going to go ahead and do an upsert on our Delta table, which is what we created, so that we'll have the latest and greatest in there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and run that as well. So now we have everything updated. Now we've got our data loaded. We've got a table. So naturally what we can do, we go back to medallion architecture here, and we can take a look at our SQL endpoints. So we can start writing queries on this. It's going to give us a little preview. Yeah. So we can go back to doing what we like doing best. Let's face it.
Yeah.
So I want to do a new query. I don't know why it's not showing me any rows. We make sure that we finished running everything. It's probably just, I probably just was a little bit faster than it was when I went and did it. The other way that I can take a look at my table too, now that I've got it here as a table, I can see my definitions here inside of my lakehouse. So let's go back to my SQL endpoint, which of course is here, and get it to select top 100. And there we go.
Yeah. You're just too quick.
Yep. And so I can do some other things that I might want to, take a look at inside of my different environment, like maybe look at, I don't know, do a new query here. Like top 10, customer name, sum quantity, total quantity. And see, I've got these people here that are duplicated a lot. So I'm going to want to write some code to bust this out. We can see that I've got a lot of different elements in here, and we're going to bust this out into different tables for customers, for products, and of course we need a date table because you can't not have a date table.
Yeah, you got to have a date table.
Absolutely. So we're going to go from our Lord of the Rings to a more standard notebook, or using our books because more standard semantic model. And to do that, I'm going to go into call this one gold. And inside of my gold layer here, what we're going to do is this is where we're going to be tweaking the data. We're going to be changing it around. So the first thing, of course, we got to do, and I'm going to tell me what I'm going to do. Otherwise I forget. So I tend to write a lot of markdown when I'm doing code. So I'm going to load data from silver. So I know I want to do that. So I'll just go ahead and make that happen. So I've got it loaded into data frames. And generally speaking, in Spark, you don't have to make it say data frame all the time, but everybody does.
They do.
So, yeah, everybody just makes them data frame.
Yeah, that's like counter variables are always the letter I. I don't know why. They just are.
Yeah. It gives me a chance to write a little. And what did I do wrong here? Probably I have a If it's me, I probably did a capitalization
I was just gonna
problem.
say, what's
Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't add my lake house. It's of
oh,
course a step that I need to do. So I need to add my lake house to, and I have to stop it to do it, into my environment, which is really great because all I have to do is this. It just like take that one step, which I
mhm.
forgot, and put my data inside of my lake house. And I don't have to write any complicated connection strings to make this happen. Just load it up into the lake house and I've already got it created. So
Oh
it's not
my
like
god,
that's a big deal. Yeah,
more magic, more
I
magic.
know. And I don't know about you, but I was doing some synapse earlier today, and this 4 second thing, like that's so much better than the 4 minute thing. I can tell you that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a drag. All right, I'm getting cocky now with knowing this is going to run. Yep, I have done this before. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create um, a a dim date table with my date information here. I'm going to be defining that. So make sure I've got that date table. And next thing I want to do, create that data frame for my date and then display the data that I've got here.
Very
So we'll
cool.
go ahead and do that. Yep. So we can't, again, have to have a date table if we're going to be having a model that we're going to be using inside of Power BI.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't found a business yet that doesn't need a date table.
Yes, of course, we do need to make sure that we can copy the right thing instead of doing the same thing over and over again. But I want to actually see the data. So this head at the top is going to give me the ability to see my date. So now I've got an order date, I got month and year. So I can, just a starter date table. Of course, you might want to make it longer, but we're good to go. We want to make sure, of course, that we can do that update because we're using Delta Lake. So we want to make sure, that we can update that data for the dimension table. So I'm going to go ahead and add that code in to do that.
Nice.
Yeah. So we got our date table. So that's one table. We need more though. We have to do more. We want a better model than this. So of course we're going to create the customer
Okay.
table definition because we need that. And to do that, we're just going to, yeah, we want to make sure that we can report appropriately and do analytics based on our customers. So we're going to call this one dim customer gold. We got customer name, email, first and last name, and the customer ID.
Nice.
Yeah. And our data doesn't look like this though. So we have to make sure that we're going to need to segment off our first and last name out of customer name because that's how it came in. It just
Okay.
got customer name together. So we were separating them out here by we're splitting it here.
Okay.
And we're also getting rid of the duplicates because we had all those duplicates that we looked at. We don't want
Yep.
a duplicate in our dimension here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then we need to make sure that we have, once it's done with that, we're going to need to create an ID because of course we have to have a customer ID. We didn't have one in that table that was created with all the sales stuff.
Yep.
So we're going to be taking a look at that. So it's busy splitting all of the data that we got here. And now we can see the customer name is now split up. And now we're going to create a customer ID so we can give an ID so we can put our, refer with IDs because, people change their names. So now
So we
we've got
can
our customer ID.
identify
Yes.
them.
Right. We want to make sure we use a number because, of course, that's the best thing for our joins. And then lastly, of course, that step that we did before, looking at that we've got can update the data when we get new stuff.
Yep. Because
So
everybody's always adding data. Nobody's ever not adding
no,
data.
right. So we want to make sure that we're getting this into Delta table. So basically making sure that it's going to be supported in Delta table. All right, so the next thing that we want to do after we've got this, and we do, is we're going to go to our next table that we want, and that is silver. So we've got our product table from silver. So we want to get our products in there because, of course, we have to have a product table. So we have our customer table. We got products here. And we're going to do some formatting on this as well. We're going to get rid of duplicates, and we're going to do some splitting of the item number because it's kind of not in a format that we want to do reporting on.
All right.
So we'll go ahead and split item name out of item info and then just take a look at what that looks like. This is our new product table. We got our unique things. And of course, we need to have that ID. We need to make sure that we've got an ID for our product table. So we'll go ahead and put our IDs here. And now we've got a product ID. So the last thing, of course, is doing that update. So notice we've got a pattern here we got going.
Yeah.
And making sure that we've got everything for Delta as well. So got that happening. And of course, we do have one more to go with this. We need to get our sales data.
Oh, so yeah, that's the thing that we're probably trying to measure, right?
Yeah, the fact table. So of course we need that. We got our dimensions, now we're gonna have our facts because we did that order on purpose because we created those keys and those keys didn't exist. So we had to do those first. So then we can use them. Yeah, we have to have keys before we can put them inside of our fact table. So now that we've got them, we're going to go ahead and put them inside of the fact table. So adding our customer ID, our item ID for our products, and putting that in here. And then our last step where we're going to be updating our data. So making sure that it is in that Delta format.
Awesome.
So we've got all of it.
Yeah, we hope we're still getting more sales coming in.
Absolutely. Otherwise, that would not be so good. So let's see. We're like, why didn't I see anything over here? How come I don't have any tables? Classic, because nobody refreshed it.
So that refresh has bitten me so many times.
It's broken. Nothing's working. Yeah. Oh, come on. Watch it not refresh for me now. And here we go.
All right.
So we've got now our dimensional model that we have created because we had our Lord of the Rings order data, and now of course we have our all of our data. So if we take a look inside of our SQL Analytics model, we also have our semantic model. So if we open this up and we want to go ahead and look at those details and kind of explore it, we can see that how they look inside of here. Or we can instead we can go to look at it inside of Power BI if we wanted to, and just use this as a starting point for a report.
Oh man, that's so cool.
I know we've now, because we've created it, we've got a semantic model, which is our starting point for Power BI. So we could say that we wanted to do a new report and we want to pick a published semantic model, and that published semantic model could be our sales, and we could just auto create ourselves up a report. Except I'm having refresh problems, but it does exist, and if I waited more than a minute and a half between what I was trying to do, I would be able to go ahead and do it, right?
Too fast again.
I know, but I can see that I've got it, which is really great to be able to see all the content inside of my workspace that I can take a look at. So got all of my information that I needed and didn't even have to write that much code to make that happen.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, let's summarize all the things that we have learned.
All right.
So, what have we learned? What have we learned?
Basically, a lot of different ways that we could take our data and then transform it
Yes,
inside
absolutely.
of Fabric.
Yeah.
So a lot of
Yeah, it
different
does.
options there as
Yeah,
well.
we have a ton of options. You demoed the notebook. We saw the SQL endpoint, um, all that kind of stuff. So lots of different ways to do things. And again, um, it doesn't have to be bronze, silver, gold. Depending on your organization, it could be more, it could be less. And you don't even have to call them bronze, silver, and gold. You can call them whatever works for your organization so that the business understands and your consumers understand what they are consuming.
And I think that's a very important thing to bring up because what you need to do is you need to adapt this to your organization and use terminology that makes sense. The concepts are the same. Break it up, make it organized. And maybe you call it something else, and that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um,
All right.
let's get back to the slide deck.
I wanted
We just
to,
have a couple of slides left that we're going to go through. Um, we want to make sure that folks know how to get registered for the 50% off for your exam. We've already gone through the summary of those principles or the things that we wanted to learn, our learning objectives there. Um, so if we go to the next slide. Um, yep,
and
that's
this
the
is,
Learn Live. Yep.
yeah, this is definitely, take a picture of this QR code with your phone, or just remember that it is March 5th F for Learn Live. And you
Yeah.
can walk through, you can do the same exact example that I just walked through, and you can make that last step and create a report with your semantic model that you've created with Power BI, and work on refreshing and going through it just maybe a tad bit slower
Yeah.
and to better understand what we are talking about. But I think the concept is really what I really like about this particular exercise is it's real world. You're taking the giant, big file and you're busting it up into a semantic model, which we can use for analytics, which is what we need to do when we're working.
Yep. Absolutely. And then the next Learn Live episode that's coming up, that's the ingest data with Spark and Fabric Notebooks. So you don't want to miss that. That is tomorrow, I believe. And I think that's the one that Greg Lowe is doing with Tom
Yes,
Martins. So
yes.
that should be really good. Don't want to miss that.
And these are all the sessions that are available. And I know that I have missed some of them because I have to do this crazy thing called work now and again. So definitely going to be going back to watch some of the ones that I have missed. Definitely want to get some more information, especially about working with Delta Lakes, because that is going to be complex. The next thing that we definitely want to bring up, though, is this here last slide.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You want to get registered in that Cloud Skills Challenge because by doing that, that gets you your 50% off exam discount. And those exams aren't cheap. So make sure you go out there and get registered for that.
Yeah, AKMS Fabric 30 Datilli.
Yeah.
DTLI. So definitely want to give yourself the opportunity for that. And then you know what? If you have not yet upgraded to Fabric, try it out. I'm
Yeah.
using the trial. The trial is awesome
Yeah.
because it's the equivalent of an F64 SKU, which is what you need. And the only I will say there's one thing that you cannot do with the Fabric trial SKU, and that's Copilot. Sorry,
Yes.
it's very sad,
It
but
is.
everything else you can do. And one thing to remember also, if you want to use source control, any Fabric SKU will let you use source control inside of your Fabric AAK Power BI tenant. So you may be thinking, well, I got Power BI. I don't need to upgrade to Fabric. Highly recommend that you perhaps think about doing it so that you can have that functionality where you've got CI/CD in. So definitely
Built right in.
want. Oh yeah, yeah. It's very useful even for people like the guy that I talked to yesterday. Said we're going to wait a year.
Yeah.
Um, to each their own, but I wouldn't wait. I'd get started with using some of this great content that is available.
Absolutely. Well, Ginger, I have had such an awesome time with you here. And for me, it's nighttime. So other people, it's our first
Sure.
thing in the morning. So our time is done, and I am so sad, but I had
Yes.
so much fun, and I can't wait for the next wave to come out.
Yes. Also, it's always great, being able to visit with you, Angela. We've known each other for a good long while now, and it's had a lot of fun just talking about fabric and all of the cool things that it can do. And I hope
Yeah.
that a lot of people got a lot out of this because I know I did.
Yeah, I did too. Well, until next time, Ginger, I'll see you.
See ya.